Part 9 is fixed as a silent emotional reverberation, not a plot resolution scene, but a dignity resolution moment. All parts 1 to 8 will be engineered toward one understated image. After the final crisis and power reversal, Adrian prepares to depart at dawn. No grand reward scene. No public gratitude. No speech. On the private runway, Claire returns the Swiss watch she took only to stop the sabotage, placing it beside a cold, untouched coffee where he first tested her. Adrian looks at the watch, then quietly removes his family crest pin from his coat and leaves it beside her unpaid diner bill from the opening. She notices, says nothing. A ground crewman calls boarding. Adrian turns as if to speak, but stops. Only an almost imperceptible nod. Claire answers with the faintest smile. He walks toward the jet, then pauses at the stairs and glances back once, not at the plane, but at her still standing in the rain light. Engines rise. She closes her hand around the pin. No explanation of what changed. The change is in what is no longer defended. This is the emotional destination every earlier part must feed. The test, mistrust, danger, rescue, revelation, all narrowing toward one moment where respect exists without being named. The symbolic objects, watch, coffee, bill, crest pin, must be seated early so the ending feels inevitable, not invented. Action first, emotion after. Silence carrying more weight than dialogue. The final line will remain quiet and moral, but breathed, not declared. Sometimes a life is changed not by who saves you, but by who sees you. Translate this, and my jet is yours, the Sheikh said, sliding a linen napkin across the polished mahogany bar as if he were offering a joke no one else was meant to understand. The room went quiet in the way expensive rooms do, where silence feels upholstered. Crystal glasses caught the amber light. Rain pressed softly against the private terminal windows overlooking the runway. Claire Whitmore stared at the Arabic script written in dark blue ink, and for one suspended second, even the clink of ice in a whiskey glass seemed to stop. She was only supposed to refill coffee. That was all anyone ever noticed. The quiet. Waitress in a black uniform, moving between leather chairs and billion-dollar conversations like a shadow with a tray. But her hand, reaching for the napkin, trembled almost imperceptibly. Adrian Hale watched her with that familiar expression powerful men wore when they were testing whether someone would break. Tall, silver at the temples, wearing a charcoal suit cut sharper than most men's opinions, he looked less like a passenger and more like the owner of the storm outside. "Well," he said, "can you translate it?" A few of his associates smirked. One muttered she probably thought Arabic was a cocktail. Claire lowered her eyes, not in submission but concentration. Then she read the line softly in English. "Delay departure until the Falcon circles twice." A silence followed. "Different now." He leaned back. "And what does that mean?" She folded the napkin once, carefully. "It isn't poetry," she said. "It's coded." Someone laughed. Adrian didn't. His gray eyes narrowed. "You're telling me my business note is a warning?" Claire set down his untouched coffee. It had gone cold. "I'm telling you," she said quietly, "someone wanted you to think it was harmless." The rain thickened against the glass. Somewhere beyond the lounge, a jet engine stirred to life. Adrian studied her as if seeing a detail he'd missed in plain sight. "What's your name?" "Claire." "Claire," he repeated, almost testing the sound of it. "And where does a waitress in a private air lounge learn to read coded Arabic?" She gave the faintest half-smile. "People are rarely where they began." Then she stepped away before the question could deepen. But Adrian's gaze followed her through the room, past the oil paintings and marble columns, past the men waiting for his signature. She moved with the quiet certainty of someone who did not need to announce intelligence to possess it. At the service station, Claire reached for another cup, but her eyes drifted to the tarmac. A maintenance truck sat where it should not have been. Too close to gate 4. Too still. Her breath caught. A memory flickered behind her eyes. Dust, radios, coded warnings once ignored. "Claire." Adrian's voice behind her. "Closer now. Softer." "Suppose I believed you." She turned. He was holding the napkin again. But his confidence had shifted by a degree. Barely visible. Human. Then don't board at 6, she said. And don't trust the man wearing the gold watch. Adrian looked down instinctively at his own Swiss watch, then back at her. For the first time that night, he didn't look amused. He looked unsettled. Beyond the glass, lightning moved over the runway in silence. And somewhere, hidden beneath the hum of wealth and polished civility, danger had already entered the room. Claire did not look back as she moved toward the service corridor, but she could feel Adrian Hale following with the weight of unanswered questions. The lounge resumed its polished murmur, yet something invisible had shifted, as if the room itself had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. At the espresso station, steam hissed softly. Claire placed a porcelain cup beneath the silver machine, though her attention stayed on the rain-streaked runway. The maintenance truck was gone. That unsettled her more. Things meant to hide often moved when noticed. "You have 5 minutes before boarding," said a voice behind her. Adrian. Not commanding now. Curious. She handed him fresh coffee, without asking how he took it. "Black," she said. "No sugar." He accepted it, almost amused. "You know that too? You have been coming here every Thursday for 7 months. His brow lifted. "And you remember all your customers this well?" "Only the ones who test strangers for sport." For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. He glanced toward the conference alcove where his advisors waited over tablets and sealed folders. One man stood apart, speaking quietly into his phone. Gold watch gleaming beneath his cuff. Adrian followed her earlier warning, without appearing to. "Suppose," he said, voice lowered, "that your coded message is real. Why warn me?" Claire set down a folded receipt beside his cup. "Because once, someone did not warn my father." The words arrived so softly, they nearly disappeared under the rain. Adrian did not press. That restraint surprised her. Most powerful men collected people's pain the way they collected leverage. He only looked at the receipt she had placed there. She had written one line across the back. Delay departure by 12 minutes. Trust no rerouted fuel order. His expression changed. Not shock. Calculation. The kind that had built empires. "You realize," he said, "if you are wrong, I miss a $12 billion signing in Doha." Claire met his eyes. "If I am right, you miss something worse." The old clock above the bar clicked to 5:48. Boarding was set for 6. Every second now seemed audible. Adrian folded the receipt into his breast pocket with surprising care. Then one of his executives approached, tense but smiling too quickly. Victor Sorin. Gold watch catching the chandelier light. "Sir, they are requesting we move up departure by 10 minutes because of the storm front." Adrian looked at him, then at Claire. "No," he said calmly. "We delay 12. Victor froze just enough for Claire to notice. Tiny things revealed fractures. "But sir, that was not a discussion." Victor stepped back. Polite. Controlled. Yet his jaw tightened. Claire saw Adrian see it too. The air between them sharpened. Adrian turned back toward her. "Who exactly were you before coffee trays?" Claire looked toward the runway lights glowing through rain. "Someone who learned danger rarely arrives shouting." A boarding announcement echoed through the private terminal. Soft female voice. Artificial calm. Adrian studied her as if trying to solve a language he had not known existed. Then, slowly, he unfastened the Swiss watch from his wrist and laid it beside the cold, untouched coffee she had served at the beginning. "Hold this," he said. "Insurance." Claire frowned. Against what? He looked toward the jet. Against trusting the wrong man. She touched the watch but did not take it yet. Outside, lightning stitched silver over the tarmac. A fuel truck rolled toward Gate 4. And Claire's breath caught when she saw the logo painted near the rear wheel. It matched the symbol hidden in the coded note. Claire did not answer at once. Her fingers rested lightly on Adrian's Swiss watch, as if touching a promise she had not agreed to keep. Beyond the glass, the fuel truck eased. Closer to the jet, headlights cutting through the rain in pale ribbons. The symbol near the rear wheel was small, almost decorative, but Claire had seen it once before, stamped on intercepted cargo manifests no civilian was supposed to recognize. Her pulse steadied instead of racing. It always did when danger became specific. "That truck should not be servicing your aircraft," she said. Adrian followed her gaze. "How do you know?" She looked at him. "Because the company dissolved 4 years ago." The words landed heavier than their volume. Adrian turned immediately toward Victor Soren, who was already walking briskly toward the jet bridge with 2 security men. "Victor," Adrian called. His voice carried no panic, only command. Victor stopped, smiled. "Too smooth." "Problem?" Adrian held up the folded receipt Claire had written on. "Change of plan." Victor's eyes flickered toward Claire for half a second. It was enough. Recognition. Not of a waitress. Of a threat. Claire felt old instincts return. Patterns, exits, timing. She stepped closer to Adrian, lowering her voice. "Do not confront him in front of his people." Adrian gave the smallest nod. He listened now. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Powerful men rarely changed direction mid-stride. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian announced to his waiting advisors almost casually, "departure is delayed pending a systems review." Groans, confused murmurs, business impatience. Yet no one argued. Money often obeyed tone. Victor approached, gold watch catching the light again. "Sir, Doha will not wait." Adrian's expression remained unreadable. "Neither will I." Victor leaned in as if offering a confidential warning. "You're taking advice from a waitress." Adrian replied without lowering his eyes. "Tonight that seems wiser than taking yours." The silence after that had edges. Victor stepped back smiling, but the smile no longer reached his face. Claire watched his right hand adjust his cuff twice. A tell. Anxiety disguised as habit. Her father used to do the same before difficult negotiations. Memory moved through her unexpectedly. A dim kitchen in Virginia. A man teaching her to read coded phrasing over chessboards. And black coffee. Never trust the obvious messenger, Claire Bear. Trust the misplaced detail. Her throat tightened, but she pushed it down. Adrian noticed something in her face soften then vanish. "Who trained you?" he asked quietly. "My father." "Military?" "Diplomatic intelligence." He studied her as if each answer reopened a larger mystery. Before he could ask more, an airport operations manager rushed in holding a tablet. "Mr. Hale, there is a discrepancy in your fuel authorization. Someone rerouted service through a contractor removed from federal clearance." Adrian looked at Claire. No triumph crossed her face. Only confirmation. The manager continued, nervous. "We can secure the aircraft, but we recommend no boarding until inspection." Victor took one step backward. Tiny, calculated. Claire saw it first. "He is leaving," she whispered. Adrian turned sharply, but Victor was already moving toward a side corridor. Adrian's security started after him. Claire caught Adrian's sleeve. "No chassis." "He tried to compromise my jet. And wants you angry." Adrian looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then at her eyes. Something wordless passed, respect forming in silence. He nodded to security to stand down. Victor disappeared into the corridor shadows, but not before glancing back once at Claire. Not hatred. Recognition again. As if he had finally placed who she might have been. Rain hammered harder now. The jet sat motionless beneath floodlights. Safe for the moment. Adrian lifted the Swiss watch from the counter and fastened it back on, then stopped. He removed it again and pressed it into Claire's palm. "Keep it until we both understand why you were in this lounge tonight." She looked at the watch ticking against her skin. Steady, measured, alive. And somewhere beneath the storm and polished marble, a test had quietly become an alliance. The storm did not pass. It settled over the private terminal like a thought unwilling to leave. Most of Adrian Hale's advisors had been escorted to a conference suite upstairs, muttering into phones about delayed contracts and vanished schedules, but Adrian remained in the nearly empty lounge, standing beside the rain-dark windows while maintenance crews circled his grounded jet. Claire had returned to the service bar, though neither of them pretended she was serving coffee anymore. The Swiss watch rested in her apron pocket, warm from her hand. It felt less like collateral now and more like a question. Adrian broke the silence first. You saw Victor's tell before I did. Claire polished a cup that was already clean. People reveal themselves when their plans bend. And you, he asked. What do you reveal? She set down the cup. Only when necessary. A faint smile touched him, gone almost instantly. Outside, an inspector's flashlight moved beneath the wing of the aircraft in slow arcs. Adrian watched it, then said, almost to himself, I built a company assuming I could measure risk. He looked at her. Tonight, a waitress measured it faster. Claire leaned against the marble counter, studying him with the same quiet reserve she had kept all evening. You do not trust easily. Neither do you. That is not the same as not caring. He seemed about to answer when an older mechanic in a reflective jacket entered carrying a sealed metal case. Water dripped from his shoulders. Mr. Hale, he said carefully, we found an unauthorized transmitter wired near the auxiliary fuel relay. Nothing detonative, but enough to disable navigation once airborne. The room grew still in a new way. Not fear. Realization. Adrian accepted the report without visible reaction, but his hand tightened once at his side. Claire noticed. Action before emotion. Always there if you looked closely. Can it be traced? Adrian asked. Federal investigators are on their way. The mechanic hesitated, then added, whoever flagged the reroute probably saved everyone on board a very bad night. He glanced at Claire with quiet respect and left. Adrian did not speak for several moments. Rain tapped the glass. Ice softened in forgotten tumblers. Then he reached into his coat and placed a black leather card holder on the counter.
No flourish. Noble llener gesture.
Come work for me, he said. Claire looked at it but did not touch it. As what? Whatever you were before life disguised you as a waitress. She almost
Laughed.
Almost. You think one night earns trust. Adrian answered with unusual softness.
No.
I think one night exposed it. Before she could respond, the overhead lights flickered once, then stabilized. Claire's head lifted sharply. Backup cycle, Adrian said. Routine. She was already shaking her head, not during isolated inspection mode. Her eyes moved toward the corridor Victor had vanished through. Something old and cold moved through her posture. He left too easily. Adrian understood at once. No explanations needed now. They moved together toward the security monitor near the concierge desk. Grainy footage rolled across multiple screens. Hangar access. Fuel bay. Service tunnel. Then Claire leaned forward. Freeze that. Adrian did. On the lower corner feed, a figure in a rain poncho was entering the maintenance corridor through a door marked electrical systems. Victor's gold watch flashed as he raised his hand to badge in. Adrian exhaled once through his nose. Not anger. Decision. Security will take 10 minutes, he said. Claire was already moving toward the service hall. Then we have 9. Adrian caught up beside her. Strange how naturally it happened, as if command had become partnership without announcement. They pushed through a steel corridor where fluorescent lights hummed and the scent of jet fuel mixed with rain-damp concrete. Their footsteps echoed. Halfway down, Adrian slowed. Claire. She turned. He held out a small silver object she had not noticed him carrying. His family crest pin. Falcon wings engraved in old platinum. In case we get separated. She stared at it, startled by the intimacy of trust hidden inside such a practical gesture. She pinned it inside her lapel without a word. Then they kept walking toward the maintenance door, where somewhere beyond humming wires and stormlight, the night was not finished testing either of them. The maintenance corridor narrowed into a maze of steel conduits and humming breaker panels, each fluorescent light casting a pale glow that made shadows look deliberate. Claire moved first, not fast but certain, as though memory was guiding her feet more than sight. Adrian stayed beside her, not behind. That alone would have surprised anyone who knew him. Men like Adrian Hale did not usually walk into uncertainty without an army. Yet here he was, following a waitress toward an electrical substation beneath his own aircraft. Ahead, a metal door stood ajar. Beyond it came the faint rhythm of tools against casing. Claire lifted one hand, signaling stillness. Adrian obeyed without question. Through the opening they could see Victor crouched beside an exposed control rack, speaking in a low, urgent tone into an earpiece. "Window closes in 7 minutes," Victor whispered. "Once he boards the backup route, the diversion begins." Adrian's jaw tightened. Claire touched his sleeve once.
Wait.
Action before reaction. Victor finished transmitting and slid something no larger than a deck of cards into a relay housing. Then footsteps echoed from another corridor and Victor vanished through a side exit, leaving the panel open. Adrian stepped forward instinctively. Claire reached the relay first. Her fingers moved over the wiring without hesitation. "It is a signal ghost," she said. "It would feed false coordinates after takeoff." Adrian stared. "Can you disable it?" "Maybe." Her voice was calm, but a strand of hair had fallen loose against her cheek, and Adrian noticed her hands, though steady, had gone pale. She pulled the silver crest pin from her lapel and used its point to release a micro latch inside the housing. Adrian almost smiled despite everything. "Using my family heirloom as a tool." "It was designed for flight," she said. "Seems appropriate." A tiny click. The device disengaged. At that exact moment, the emergency lights blinked red. Then darkness swallowed the corridor for one long breath before backup power glowed dim gold. Somewhere a security alarm began to pulse softly. Adrian looked toward the hall. He triggered a diversion. Claire nodded. "To draw us away from something larger." They ran back toward the tarmac access, footsteps echoing through concrete. When they pushed through the service exit, cold rain hit like a sheet. Floodlights washed the runway silver. And Claire stopped.
The jet.
Ground crews were backing away from the aircraft. One engine had begun autonomous startup. No pilot aboard. Adrian's expression changed in a way Claire had not seen before. Not fear for himself. Fear for everyone near it. "It is remote activated," she said. If it taxis into the fuel lane, he did not wait for the sentence. They ran across slick pavement, rain cutting sideways in the wind. Adrian shouted for ground control over a field radio, but static answered. Claire reached the wheel chock beside the nose gear and saw what others had missed. The tether pin had been loosened. Deliberately. She dropped to one knee in pooled rainwater, hands working at the assembly. Adrian knelt beside her, without concern for his $1,000 suit soaking through. Together they forced the lock back into place, just as the engine spool faltered, then powered down. Silence returned so abruptly it rang. Only rain. Only breathing. Ground crew members stood frozen under floodlights, watching. One mechanic crossed himself. No one spoke. Adrian looked at Claire, water running from his hair to his collar. "You just stopped a ghost from flying my jet." She gave a tired, almost laugh. "You helped. I handed you a pin. Sometimes that is enough." Security vehicles finally arrived in flashing amber arcs. Victor was nowhere in sight. But the night had turned. Adrian rose and offered Claire his hand. She took it. Simple gesture. Yet something passed there beyond rescue. As they walked back from the runway, Adrian glanced at the Swiss watch on her wrist, where she had slipped it without noticing. He did not ask for it back. And under the storm, with engines quiet and danger receding, Claire realized the man who had tested her with a joke now trusted her with his life. The rain had softened to a silver mist by the time federal investigators sealed the aircraft bay, but no one seemed eager to leave. Something larger than an incident had unfolded, and everyone in the terminal felt it without naming it. Adrian stood beneath the awning overlooking the runway, jacket draped over one shoulder, his white shirt damp at the cuffs, watching technicians move around the immobilized jet. Claire leaned against a steel column nearby, exhausted in the quiet. Way people become after adrenaline leaves. The Swiss watch still circled her wrist. Neither had mentioned it. "You should sit down," Adrian said. That sounded like an order. Concern. She glanced at him. "That is new." He gave the faintest smile. Then a black government sedan rolled to the curb. 2 federal agents stepped out. One approached Adrian, handed him a secure folder, and spoke in low tones. Adrian listened, expression unreadable, then opened the folder. His eyes moved once across the page and stopped. He looked up at Claire. Different now. Almost stunned. What? She asked. Adrian walked toward her, holding out the file. On the cover was a photograph 20 years old. A diplomatic security briefing. A younger man beside a coded communications board. Claire's father. She went still. Beneath the image, a notation. Deceased operative linked to Operation Falcon Meridian. Adrian watched recognition move through her face. My father used that phrase, she whispered. Falcon Meridian. Her hand tightened around the folder. Why do you have this? Adrian took a slow breath. Because my father funded that operation. Silence. Not dramatic.
Deeper.
Rain tapped metal roofing in small measured notes. Claire looked at him as if seeing an outline behind the man she thought she knew. You knew him? I was 14. Adrian's voice had lost its polished edge. Your father once pulled mine out of an embassy siege. He gave a small, almost disbelieving shake of his head. And tonight his daughter pulled me out of another. Claire lowered her eyes. Action first, emotion after. Her thumb moved unconsciously over the Swiss watch crystal. He never spoke about what he saved, she said. Adrian answered softly. Some people do not build identity around the lives they protect. For a long moment, neither moved. The whole story seemed to fold inward there, not into destiny, but into something quieter. Then one of the agents approached again. Mr. Hale, we located Victor Soren attempting departure from a private strip in New Jersey. He is in custody. Adrian only nodded.
No traíem.
The important thing had shifted elsewhere. The agent left. Claire exhaled, as though releasing. Something carried for years. I thought my father disappeared into a footnote. Adrian looked at her with an expression she had not seen from him before. Almost grief. Almost gratitude. Tonight, he introduced us. A maintenance worker passed carrying a tray of untouched coffees abandoned during the chaos. One cup stopped Adrian's eye. The cold black coffee Claire had first served him. He picked it up, studied it, then set it gently beside her on the rail. Still untouched, she said. It kept me alive. She looked at him, then really looked. The arrogance that had entered with him hours earlier seemed worn away by weather. In its place was something steadier. Human. Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out the black leather card holder again, but instead of offering employment, he removed a handwritten note and placed it in her hand.
No flerish.
Only 5 words. I owe you no debt. Claire frowned. What does that mean? Debt implies repayment. He held her gaze. Some things change you instead. Dawn had begun to pale the horizon beyond the hangars. The storm was breaking. Claire slipped the note beside the crest pin in her pocket.
Seat beside symbol.
Then Adrian glanced at the watch on her wrist. Keep it until sunrise. And after? He looked toward the first gold line forming over the runway. We will see what survives daylight. Somewhere behind them engines stirred for morning departures, but neither turned. For the first time all night, there was nothing to solve. Only 2 people standing in the hush after danger, listening to a silence that felt unexpectedly alive. Morning arrived in layers of pale gold over the runway, dissolving the storm as if the night had only been a difficult rumor. The private terminal felt changed in daylight.
Softer.
Less theatrical. Investigators had thinned out. Advisors whispered over revised schedules. Somewhere coffee was brewing again, ordinary and almost sacred after a night shaped by hidden dangers. Claire stood alone near the window wall where she had first translated the coded note. The cold cup Adrian had left beside her remained there, untouched, catching the first sun along its rim. She traced the edge absently, thinking of her father, of all the years she had mistaken silence for absence. You always stand where you can see exits. Adrian's voice came from behind her. She turned. He had changed into a fresh shirt, though the night still lingered in his face. Not fatigue. Reflection. Occupational habit, she said. Or old wounds. He stepped beside her, close enough that the glass reflected them as one frame. For a moment neither spoke. The runway lights blinked off one by one as daylight took over. Adrian looked out toward his aircraft, now cleared for departure. The board expects me in Doha by noon. And yet you are here. I have spent half my life leaving when staying mattered more. She looked at him, surprised not by the words, but by the unguarded way he offered them. Action before emotion. Even confession arrived disguised as observation. Adrian reached into his coat and handed her a thin envelope, old paper, creased at the corners. The agents found this in archived Falcon Meridian files. It was addressed to you. Claire opened it with careful fingers. Her father's handwriting. Instantly recognizable. A single sentence. If you ever meet the sun, trust what he protects when no one sees. Her breath caught so quietly only Adrian noticed. She folded the note back with almost ceremonial care. He knew. Adrian nodded once. Maybe fathers know more than they say. A long silence followed, but it did not feel empty. It felt inhabited. Then Adrian did something stranger than any dramatic gesture. He took the Swiss watch from her wrist and adjusted the time back by 12 minutes. The exact delay that had saved the flight. He fastened it again and stepped back. Why? She asked. To remember the minutes that mattered. She looked down at the watch, at time deliberately altered, and something in her expression softened into a sadness almost tender. Across the terminal, an assistant hurried over with a tablet, clearly anxious. Sir, the Doha delegation is threatening to withdraw. Adrian took the tablet, glanced at the screen, then handed it back untouched. Tell them they can wait. The assistant froze. Claire almost smiled. When the man left, she said, that may cost. You. Adrian looked at her. Not as much as nearly ignoring you did. A boarding announcement sounded. This time real. The jet was ready. Adrian lifted his carry-on, but did not move toward the gate. Come with me, he said quietly. Not impulsive. Not romantic. Simple. Serious. Claire studied him for a long moment. The old version of him might have expected immediate yes. This man did not. He only waited. She touched the crest pin still fastened inside her lapel. I do not belong in your world. Adrian's eyes held hers. You were the only person in it last night who knew what was happening. She looked down, then toward the runway where sunlight now struck the wing in bright silver. I need time. Then take it. No disappointment in his tone. Only respect. He reached into his pocket, placed a boarding stub on the windowsill beside the cold coffee. First class to Doha. Unused. In case time changes its mind. He turned then and began walking toward the gate. Claire watched him go, tall and unhurried, not once looking back. At the jet stairs he paused. Not turning, just pausing, as if listening for something beyond engines. Claire lifted her hand almost imperceptibly. He seemed to feel it. Then he boarded. The engines began to hum. Claire stood alone with the coffee, the watch, the letter, the unused ticket. Small things. Heavy things. As the jet rolled toward the runway, she noticed he had left one more thing beneath the cup. The black leather card holder, empty except for a new note.
No signature.
Just 5 words. Some meetings arrived disguised as tests. Claire read it twice, then folded it into her pocket beside her father's letter. Outside, the jet gathered speed into morning light, and for the first time in years she felt the future not as threat, but as open sky. 3 weeks later, snow drifted in slow spirals outside a small cafe on Lexington Avenue where Claire had taken an early shift, not because she needed the hours, but because ordinary rituals had begun to feel precious. The airport had returned to rumor. News outlets called the sabotage attempt a security anomaly. Victor Sorin had disappeared into sealed investigations. Adrian Hale had crossed oceans. And boardrooms. And yet certain mornings still felt suspended in the 12 borrowed minutes that had altered both their lives. Claire stood polishing silver at the front counter when a familiar sound made her pause. Not a voice. A watch clasp clicking against marble. She looked up. Adrian stood there in a dark wool coat dusted with snow, carrying no entourage, no visible urgency, only a folded newspaper under one arm and the same unreadable calm she had come to recognize as the surface of deeper things. You serve coffee in more ordinary places now, he said. Claire looked at him for a long second before answering. And you arrive without warning. I was told surprise can reveal character. A trace of warmth touched her mouth. She poured him black coffee before he asked. Some recognitions no longer needed speech. He sat at the counter instead of taking a private table. Not beside Wealth. Beside her. Through the window traffic moved under winter light. For a while they spoke of practical things.
Doha.
The investigation. Her father's recovered files. Small subjects carrying larger undercurrents. Then Adrian placed a slim envelope on the counter. My board voted yesterday. Claire glanced at it but did not open it. Should I be worried? Possibly. He almost smiled. Inside was not a contract, nor an offer of employment, but a restored photograph. Her father and Adrian's father standing beside a twin-engine aircraft decades earlier. On the back, a handwritten note from Adrian. Some debts become inheritance. Claire touched the image as though afraid movement might disturb memory. You had this restored. I thought it belonged where it would be seen. Silence settled again, companionable now. Then the bell over the cafe door chimed, and an elderly man entered struggling with the cold. Claire stepped out from behind the counter to help him remove his gloves, warm his hands around tea, settle him near the radiator. Adrian watched without interruption. When she returned, he was studying her the way one studies a truth already suspected. What? She asked. The first night, I thought you were hiding a former life. He lifted the coffee cup. Now I think this is who you always were. She looked away first. Not from discomfort. From the weight of being seen too clearly. Afternoon light shifted gold against the glass. Adrian reached into his coat and placed something small beside her saucer. The unused Doha boarding stub. Folded, worn at the edges. You kept that. I keep unfinished things. Claire turned it over. On the back he had written a date.
Tomorrow.
Noon. Private Terminal East Hangar. She looked up. Another test? No, his voice quieted. An invitation. Before she could answer, a delivery boy rushed in from the cold with a package addressed to Claire Whitmore. No return label. Inside was a velvet watch case. The Swiss watch. She stared. But I thought. Adrian lifted his wrist.
But
It was never really mine after that night. Inside the case, tucked beneath the watch, was the crest pin she had used to disable the relay, polished now, repaired where it had bent. Claire ran her thumb over the falcon engraving. The smallest things kept returning transformed. The elderly customer called for his check. Claire moved to help him. Adrian stood as well and, before leaving, placed cash beneath the untouched cold coffee she had absent-mindedly set near him. She noticed only after he had reached the door.
Adrian.
He turned. Snow moved behind him like ash in slow motion. Will you be at the hangar tomorrow? She asked. He held her gaze. Only if you come. Then he stepped into the winter light and was gone. Claire unfolded the bill beneath the coffee. Written on the receipt line, in his precise hand, were 6 words. The line that changes everything waits. She stood motionless for several seconds, hearing the bell still trembling above the door. Outside, snow softened the city into silence. She looked at the watch, the boarding stub, the old photograph aligned on the counter like pieces of a language only now becoming clear. And somewhere deep beneath thought, before decision had words, she already knew she would go. At noon the next day the East Hangar stood washed in winter sunlight, quieter than the main terminal, almost monastic in its stillness. Claire arrived in her plain wool coat, with a Swiss watch fastened at her wrist and the crest pin tucked inside her lapel, where no one could see it. She carried nothing else.
No lagi. No declaración.
Only the old photograph folded inside her pocket. Adrian was already there near the jet stairs, not issuing instructions, not on his phone, simply standing with one hand in his coat pocket as though waiting had become a form of attention. When he saw her, he did not smile broadly. He only inclined his head once, the same almost imperceptible nod from the night of rain. It was enough. Beside the boarding steps sat a small cafe table set unexpectedly on the tarmac edge, 2 porcelain cups, steam rising in the cold. The same black coffee, this time warm. Claire looked at it, then at him. You moved a coffee house onto a runway. Adrian answered, I thought we should begin where we almost ended. They sat. Planes moved far off in silver arcs. Ground crews passed without intruding. They spoke little. About nothing urgent. A flock of birds crossed the bright winter sky. At one point, Adrian reached into his pocket and placed her old unpaid diner receipt on the table, now pressed flat, preserved between clear paper. Beside it he set a fountain pen. Claire looked at him. What am I signing? Nothing. He slid the pen toward her. I thought you should have the last word this time. She studied the blank back of the receipt, then wrote only one line and folded it once. She did not show him. Instead, she tucked it beneath his coffee saucer. Minutes later, boarding was called. Adrian rose.
So, did she?
A wind moved across the runway, lifting a strand of her hair. He reached as if to move it, then stopped halfway, letting the gesture remain unfinished. Claire noticed, said nothing. At the foot of the stairs, Adrian removed his family crest pin from her lapel, turned it once in his fingers, then fixed it again more carefully, straighter than before. Such a small act, it might have meant nothing to anyone watching. Yet Claire's breath caught. He stepped onto the first stair, then paused. From his wrist he removed, nothing this time. The watch remained on hers. He only looked at it once, as if confirming something had found its proper owner. Then he climbed. 2 steps, stopped again, and turned. Claire did not wave. She only lifted the cold coffee cup she had absent-mindedly carried out with her and set it on the bottom stair where he could see it. The same cup from the beginning. Empty now. Adrian looked at the cup, then at her, and a smile, small and unguarded, finally reached his eyes. He descended 1 step, reached beneath the saucer where she had hidden the folded receipt, opened it, read her single line, and went still. She had written, "Delay nothing that matters." He closed the paper, placed it over his heart for the briefest second, then boarded without another word. The engine stirred. Claire stood alone as the jet rolled toward the runway. But before takeoff, it stopped. Just for a moment. Through the cockpit glass, she saw the landing lights blink twice. A signal. Not aviation protocol. A private acknowledgement. Then the plane lifted into winter light. She remained watching until it became a silver mark against the sky. Only when the sound had faded did she look down. On the table where they had shared coffee lay Adrian's pen, left behind. She picked it up and slipped it beside her father's photograph. The ground crew began clearing the tarmac. Someone asked if she needed a ride back inside. Claire shook her head. She stayed a little longer in the cold, listening to the hush after engines. Her hand rested over the watch without thinking. Time moved, but not quite as before. And in the stillness, what lingered was not the rescue, nor the danger, nor even the departure, but a man who had learned to pause, and a woman who had finally chosen not to disappear. Sometimes a life is changed not by who stays, but by who makes silence feel seen.